Welcome to Campfire Tales. So, this week I am telling a tale from Norfolk, England, about a young woman renowned for her fearlessness in the face of the living and the dead. By now, I'm sure you know that I love a good story that subverts the traditional gender roles and female assertiveness in a patriarchal society. So, I'm really excited to introduce you to the story of the Dauntless Girl. Once upon a time, there was a girl who worked for a farmer. One evening, he and his friends were drinking when they ran out of liquor. The farmer said, "No worries, my girl will go down to the pub and bring us back another bottle." But the night was pitch black, and his friends scoffed. "Surely she'll be too scared to go out alone on a night like this." The farmer shook his head. "Nope, not her. She's afraid of nothing, living or dead." So the girl went out and returned with the bottle unfazed. The farmer's friends found it remarkable that she was so fearless. "That's nothing," said the farmer. "She'd go anywhere, day or night. There isn't a thing on this earth or beyond it that could scare her." Then he made a bet, a golden coin that none of them could come up with a challenge she wouldn't dare to complete. One of the men accepted. They agreed to meet in a week and he would name her task. In the meantime, the man went to a local parson and borrowed the key to the church. Then he found the old groundskeeper and struck a deal. For half a coin, the groundskeeper would hide inside the dead house and try to scare the girl when she arrived. When the day of the challenge came, the men gathered at the farmer's house. The challenger stood and declared, "Now here's something the dauntless girl definitely won't do. She won't go into the church alone at midnight, enter the dead house, and bring back a skull to us." But the girl didn't hesitate. She simply nodded and set off. The church was silent when she arrived, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and decay. She unlocked the dead house and stepped inside. The skulls lay in a pile, grinning in the candlelight. She bent down and picked one up. From the shadows, a muffled voice growled, "Leave that be. That's my mother's skull." She frowned, but set it down and picked up another. Again, the voice rasped, "Leave that be. That's my father's skull." Now irritated, she grabbed a third and snapped, "Mother or father, sister or brother, I must have a skull, and that's my last word." With that, she turned and walked out, locking the dead house behind her. When she returned, she placed the skull on the table. "There is your skull, master," she said, and went back to her work. The man who had made the bet stared at her. "Why, didn't you hear anything strange, Mary?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Some fool of a ghost tried to stop me, kept calling out, 'That's my father's skull, that's my mother's skull.' But I just told him plain I had a job to do, so I took it. And as I was locking the door behind me, I heard something shrieking like mad." Now the man who had arranged the trick turned pale, for he realized what had happened. They rushed to the dead house, unlocked the door, and found the old groundskeeper lying on his face, stone dead from fright. "Well," someone muttered, "he got what he deserved for trying to frighten an innocent girl." The farmer, pleased with her courage, handed her the golden coin he had won. A short time later, in a village down in Suffolk, there lived a squire whose elderly mother had recently passed away, but she refused to rest. The servants would see glimpses of her at odd times, especially at meals. Sometimes her full figure would appear, and sometimes only a floating knife and fork, moving as though invisible hands were using them. The servants were terrified, and they began to quit one by one. The squire, desperate for a solution, heard about the dauntless girl, who feared nothing. So he rode to the village and asked if she would come work for him. "I don't mind ghosts," she said, "but that should be reflected in my wages." The squire agreed, and she came to his house. At meal times, She made sure to set a place for the ghost and was careful never to cross the knife and the fork. She served the invisible presence as if she were still alive, offering, "Pepper, ma'am? Salt, ma'am?" This seemed to please the ghost, but she did not disappear. Then, one day, the squire had to travel to London for business, leaving the girl alone in the house. The next morning, as she was scrubbing a grate, she noticed the door slowly creak open. A pale, hazy form slipped through and expanded until the old woman's ghost stood before her. For the first time ever, the ghost spoke. "Mary, are you afraid of me?" "No, ma'am," Mary replied without looking up. "You're dead. I'm alive. There's no reason for me to be afraid." The ghost seemed startled, but pressed on. "Mary, will you come down to the cellar with me? You mustn't bring a light, but I will shine enough to guide you." Mary followed. The ghost glowed like a lantern, leading the way down the stone steps. When they reached the floor, she pointed to a patch of loose tiles. "Lift those," she said. Mary did as she was told and uncovered two heavy bags of gold, one large and one small. "That large bag is for your master," the ghost said, "and the small one is for you are a dauntless girl and you deserve it." With that, the ghost faded and was never seen again. Mary had to feel her way back up to the cellar steps in the dark. 3 days later, the squire returned. "Morning, Mary," he said. "Have you seen anything of my mother since I've been away?" "Yes, sir," she said. "And if you're not afraid to come down to the cellar with me, I'll show you something." The squire chuckled. "Afraid? Not if you aren't." He took a candle and they went down together. Mary pulled back the tiles and revealed the two bags of gold. "There they are," she said. "The small one's for you and the big one's for me." The squire's face twisted. "Well now, I'd have thought my own mother would leave me the big one." But seeing as he had no choice, he accepted what was given. And from that day forward, Mary always crossed the knives and the forks at meals to keep the ghost from returning and telling her son what had happened. In the end, the squire married the Dauntless Girl, and so after all, she got both bags of gold. What a clever, dauntless girl. All right, let's break down some of the symbology in this story. So we have the skull, and the skull test shows how the Dauntless Girl is defiant against the forces that frighten others, proving that she has some mastery over fear and transformation. This is especially interesting given the time frame in which, in the era which the story was written, girls were supposed to be afraid, and this one was not. But the skull can also be seen, especially through a Jungian lens, as a threshold guardian, standing between the conscious and the unconscious mind. And her willingness to take the skull, despite the warnings, symbolizes her ability to cross into the realm of the dead without fear. So, really, it's an integration of the shadow self. Now, the church and the dead house where that skull is symbolic in multiple layers. First, the church as a house of both the divine and the dead is akin to the underworld, a liminal space between life and death. And in the story, the Dauntless Girl enters the dead house alone, faces a quote unquote ghost, and emerges victorious. This marks her as someone who has undergone an initiatory trial and proven her mastery. But the dead house also represents this womb of initiation, a space where ego death occurs so that a stronger self can emerge. Then we get to the ghostly mother. And the Dauntless Girl doesn't banish the ghost, right? She acknowledges her, gives her a place at the table. This act of acceptance and respect and not fear leads to a reward, the buried treasure, symbolizing that when we face the past and the dead with respect, it can also bring new opportunities. And the two bags of gold symbolize that tension between the ego, like the squire's entitlement, and the self, the dauntless girl's earned wisdom. So the larger bag going to her in the end suggests individuation, that she has navigated the unknown and returned with knowledge and wealth. But her decision to deceive the squire is also an act of self empowerment. She was the source of a bet and she knows what her worth is. She also cleverly knows that the squire will not consult his mother's ghost. And so he just assumes that it's correct because she has had the wisdom to talk with the mother. So, in the end, this cute little story really is about not underestimating the lengths some people will go to demonstrate their bravery. And to be both dauntless and clever means you can bring wealth and knowledge upon yourself. So I hope you enjoyed this little tale, and I will see you in the next one.